Hey guys, it's Dmitry here, and in this tutorial I would like to discuss about a really important topic in JavaScript. It's called promises, and why we need them, how we use them, and like in general, what they're useful for. So, as I discussed in previous tutorial, where I discussed about asynchronous versus synchronous processes, um, nowadays many developers widely use so-called promises in case of the asynchronous processes. So let's discuss about what this promise is. But before that, I really would like to come up with a really basic example of synchronous process or synchronous code in order to remind you what a synchronous process is. So let's define a couple of variables. The first one, first name, I'll call Dmitry. Second one, last name, key. So, and I also would like to define a function. It's going to be a quite simple function, and the idea of this function, come on, concat. It's going to concatenate these two strings. I'm just going to pass them, right? So, and I'm going to log them out. I'm going to say first name plus last name. Pretty much it. So, and now I'm just going to call this function, which is here we go. So, and essentially if you run it, you see guys, the result, expected result, right? Nothing special about that. But guys, the most important thing to understand, like that, again, this code, as we discussed previously, this code is completely synchronous, right? Every line, or line by line, everything is executed line by line, right? From the top till the bottom. First line, so on, so on, so on, right? And then we call in this function, and basically then we run in this function, right? But essentially that's how it works, right? So it's synchronous, straightforward process. Now guys, let's discuss about promises. Let's first start typing, and I will show how to implement them. So in order to start writing promise, you have to use the keyword new and then type promise. And the promise itself is going to take two arguments. Usually the first argument, we call it resolve, and the second one reject. But again, these arguments or variables, they, you can call them in differently, right? It's not really mandatory to call them this way, right? But it's just kind of, self-explanatory what they're doing in case when you stick with this naming. And even here you can see, right, even in description, they call them resolve and reject, right? And the actual thing, the actual promise, like the whole thing, we can call it as how they call them executor, essentially. Executor, right? Oh, executor, yeah. So, and guys, the most important thing to understand, like when something was executed successfully and we return in it, resolve going to be called as a function. Otherwise it's going to be rejected. In case if you call in remote server and you the result you get is like I don't know, it was rejected, or you didn't get the result that you expected, then you're going to call this reject, and it's going to be a function, right? Essentially. Once again, in promise, it's like a wrapper, right? And we have to path the function, right, or callback function, and function going to take two parameters, resolve and reject, and essentially these two parameters, they are functions. We can come up with the basic logic, right? At the moment this logic is not going to be asynchronous, but I will show you guys. For instance, if you come up with this kind of logic, like let x equal to 10, basic logic, but at least you can understand what, how it works. So, and you can say if x equal, we're using strict comparison, right? So then call this function, right, resolve, and I'm passing this x. I would like to pass this x in this case. So otherwise I'm saying reject, call reject function. And for instance, usually in case of reject function, it means it's an error or something when it failure or whatever. So, and I would like just to pass a string, and I will call it error, literally as it is, error. So guys, basic logic, right? It should explain you like how in general it works, right? The approach itself. Again, you can see we are wrapping this callback function into promise, and the function, the callback function, it's receiving two parameters, and obviously this parameter they resolved, and later on, if it's like resolved successfully, or we get in with a successful result, then we're going to call this resolve function in case of success, right? Otherwise, if it's failure happened, or like if logic wasn't successful here, for example, here is basic logic, right? X, for instance, if x is 11, right, then this one, this condition is going to fail, and in this case, we go in to call this function, right, reject. And that's exactly what would happen in case, for instance, if we're calling remote server and we receiving a false like failure, or the result that we're not expecting to receive. In this case, we can call straight away. We can specify the logic in order to call reject, right? In order to show that it's actually error, right? It's the result wasn't successful. Okay, guys, but it's not. It's more to that. So now what happened is, here we call in this resolve function, right? But the actual promise is not resolved yet, right? So we need to call then function. I will show you. So now basically the pending resolution was passed here, and what we can do now, in order to actually resolve the actual promise and got the final result, what we can do that result dot then, and here we passing callback function with the actual value. And because here, when we call the resolve, we were passing this x, essentially that's exactly what we're receiving here. And we can call it differently, right? I can call it like past x, for instance. Past x, right? So, and I can say console.log in order to check if it definitely was passed, right? Passed X. That's it, right? So let's run. Woo. Unhandled error. Fair enough. Right, I think I missed something, right? Resolve new. Technically it should work. Let's define one more thing. Let's define catch. And catch, it's in case if error happens, right? Then you're going to call catch. So, and we're going to say error. Also going to pass callback function. And let's log it out if it's error, right? So you can see it, guys. Here we go. Okay, yeah, makes sense why it happened. Look, because this do you remember we defined here as 11, right? Now this x is equal to 11, right? So, and obviously this condition would fail, right? Straight away we moved here and executed reject, right? We were calling reject, so which is going to pass error, and then straight away we're going to jump to this piece of code, and this error, this string that was passed, it's going to be passed here, and as a result we will get error. That's exactly what we receive. If I execute once again, error, right? Here we go. So guys, if I define 10, here we go, we came up with 10, right? Straight away we passed here 10. So basically the promise was resolved, right? And in order to resolve this promise, you have to come up with this kind of logic. So without using then, you cannot resolve the promise. That's how it is, guys. So once again, first you defining this promise, you wrapping this callback function, and you passing resolve and reject parameters, which is later on going to be function that you're going to call, right? And you're going to call resolve function in case if you receive successful result from logic that you called before. Otherwise, in case of failure, you're going to call reject function. And here basically I show you how to do that. And then when you're calling, in case of resolve or reject, it doesn't matter, still you have to resolve the actual promise. That's how they call that. And in order to do that, you have to specify, you have to call this then, right? Then function. And also you have to pass callback function. Otherwise you have to call this catch function in case of failure or error. Yeah, and you're going to pass the thing that you passed previously when you call reject function. Simple as that, guys. Guys, hopefully it makes sense. The concept itself, it's not that difficult. Probably it's not the most straightforward concept, but reality is the most important thing to understand, that this promise here, it's acting as a wrapper kinda. And the most important thing to remember, you're passing callback function and you're passing 2 parameters to this callback function, and later on these 2 parameters, based on if we come up with the successful result or failure, you're going to call one of these parameters at a time. You cannot call both of them, right? You cannot call resolve and reject at the same time. It's impossible. You can call resolve or reject. That's it. That's how it works. Because this resolver, that's how we call them, overall resolver, it it wouldn't allow you to call simultaneously both of them, reject and resolve, only one at a time. And then don't forget that you have to resolve the actual promise. In order to do that, you have to call this then function. Okay guys, I think I'm going to wrap up this tutorial. Hopefully guys it makes sense, and later on we're definitely going to discuss more about promises, because there is not only one way how you can define logic in case of promises. It's another way. I'm not going to give up all the secrets how to do that, but I'm going to show you later on. But still, this tutorial shows you how to write the legal, legitimate logic in case of promises, right? Like basically on an everyday basis, I'm using this logic in order to write promises and in order to work with asynchronous processes. Okay guys, thank you very much for your time, thank you very much for watching, and please subscribe guys, please like this tutorial if you like it, and I will see you next time guys. Goodbye.